Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Kota Cappers College Football Computer Show, episode 8 here. We're recording Saturday morning, Dan, a little different. We're up early at it, but it's going to be a great show, going to be a good day. I'm Kota Capper Pace, and that's Dan Angel 11. Dan, how are we doing here this morning?
Yeah, it's an early morning, as you said, but it's good preparation for me for a week and a half from now when the World Cup kicks off. So that'll be nice.
That's right, Dan. You got a couple of busy weeks ahead of you here. World
Yeah,
Cup time, and you guys are going to be busy, hard at it. Of course, you can follow the Gabacho Baracho Soccer U.S. Soccer Talk podcast. Dan, Thomas, and Corey do a great job with that. So, if you are interested in soccer and want to play some soccer bets, that's your number one source. Those three guys right there. So go on and check that out. But Dan, we got some football here before we get to the World Cup next week, or
mhm.
what, 2 weeks from now, right?
Um,
Um,
yeah. So I think it's nine days now is the
9 days. Yep.
U.S.'s first match.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So very, very fun. So let's knock out here some rankings here, Dan. Of course, if you don't know what the show is about, if this is the first time you stumbled upon this episode, you can find all the links in the description of how Dan breaks everything down. And let's start with the ACC here, Dan. Now, more conference games here, Dan. So does the computer anything change there or not so much?
A little bit. I mean, it's tending to compare apples to apples a little bit more with conference games because most of these teams have played a lot of the same teams by this point in the season. So some of these teams that it's been getting a pretty good read on, it should be pretty accurate. Last night was a almost a really good example as Fresno State had a 10-point lead. The computer picked them by 9, and then of course UNLV hits a meaningless field goal to anyone who didn't bet on the game. So it worked out for me because I went Fresno team total because UNLV's defense is horrible and Hayner just goes off when he sees the Rebels. But yeah, if you had Fresno minus the 8.5, not so much.
Yep, there we go. So all right, let's start with the ACC here, Dan. Last week, 4-3, 3-4, 4-3 straight up, 3-4 against the spread. Florida State, 7.5 point favorites here, taking on Syracuse. The computer likes Florida State by 4. What do you like here?
Yeah, I think the computer might be hesitating a little bit on Syracuse. I think the computer's read is okay, Syracuse has been good for most of the season, but they're not playing well right now. So it knows that Florida State is at least a good team, so it's leaning toward trusting Florida State a little bit, but at the same time, Syracuse 5-1 straight up at home this year. So I think the computer's kind of hedging a little bit.
Sounds good. Duke minus 9.5. The computer likes them by 14 over Virginia Tech.
Yeah, like usually you see a spread like this in November and you're like, wait, did I stumble onto basketball picks by accident? But this Virginia Tech team is just so bad. I mean, they're 2-7, so they already know that they're not going to a bowl game. So at this point, I honestly kind of wonder what motivation does Virginia Tech really have left for either this game or the Liberty game next week? I mean, obviously they're going to be very motivated to play Virginia no matter what their record is, but going up against a Duke team that is trying to get to as good of a bowl as possible. I mean, Duke already bowl eligible, so they don't have to worry about that. But they finished the year with 3 winnable games, and this Duke team could easily get to 8-4 and get a pretty nice postseason destination. So I think Duke comes in motivated and rolls here.
Sounds good. I have a juice parlay here today, Dan, and I'm adding Duke to it as well. So I think they can easily get that one. Obviously, a little juicy as big favorites here, but I think they can win this one. So I like that.
I mean, I did something similar with the MAC on this past week. I just
Yeah.
took Ohio and Toledo both to win. I probably could have gotten a little more aggressive on Ohio's spread, but it worked out.
Yeah, a win's a win.
Mhm.
Big 12 here last week, 3-2 straight up, 3-2 against the spread. Baylor minus 2.5, but the computer likes them by just 1 point over Kansas State here.
Yeah, so both of these teams are very, very talented teams, and this game really will go a long way to deciding who gets to join TCU in the Big 12 title game. Kansas State, the computer, a little bit disappointed by how they just did not show up in the first half against Texas. Other than that game, though, the computer has mostly been pretty high on the Wildcats. The issue there is, are they going to be able to pass the ball that much? Because Kansas State's passing offense is pretty weak. Their running game is pretty good, but so is Baylor's, and K State just doesn't have the run defense to slow down the Bears. So I think that this is going to be a close game that'll probably be decided by one possession. So, yeah, I think the computer's probably right on with this one.
Sounds good. Texas TCU. Everyone's going to be watching this. Texas minus 7.5. The computer likes them by 8 over TCU. I don't think the Longhorns won last year. I think Dan, right? Is that
They
correct?
did, but that's one of the few wins that they've had
Yeah.
against TCU since the Frogs joined the Big 12. Texas is kind of a weird one because it's kind of similar to Syracuse in that the computer has a lot of early data on Texas as being a really strong team. The last couple weeks, it hasn't been all that impressive. They did get a really impressive win against Kansas State, but before that, they lost to Oklahoma State right before Oklahoma State completely imploded, and they barely escaped at home against Iowa State. So I think the computer's favoring the early season results, especially the Alabama and the Oklahoma game, a little. I don't know here. I think TCU has just punched above its weight all season long. This is not going to be an easy game for them, but I think this might be a couple too many points.
I agree. I think it's going to be a very close game. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas wins. I wouldn't be surprised if TCU wins. It's almost a must-win game for Texas. Almost a
Yeah,
must-win.
it absolutely is. No question. And it's a must win game for TCU. I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
they want any chance at the playoff, they have to run the table.
yeah.
Also, interestingly, in the Big 12, if home field advantage didn't come into account, the difference between Iowa State and Oklahoma State in the ratings this week, 1/100th of a point.
Crazy.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I've never had a situation where two teams with the exact same rating played each other after there was any data on the computer, but that was almost the one.
Wow. Oklahoma State plus 1.5. Computer likes them by 3 over Iowa State. All right.
Yeah, so there's the home field advantage for you
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. Very interesting. Cool. All right. Big Ten here, Dan. Last week, 5-2, straight up 6-1 against the spread. That's pretty good. Let's go. I had a game I liked. Michigan State minus 9.5. I thought this was too low, but the computer likes them by 20 over Rutgers. Rutgers is bad,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. Rutgers is just they've basically run out of steam. I mean, the Scarlet Knights are kind of like I'm not really sure how to say this because it's like normally you say the poor man's version of someone, but Iowa is already pretty poor as it is. So like, is Rutgers like the homeless man's version of Iowa, or I don't know, because the Scarlet Knights actually do have a pretty good defense, but the problem is their offense is just such a wreck. And they've been playing against easier teams than Iowa has. So even though Rutgers has a little bit better numbers, this team still can't score much at all. So I think Michigan State is finally starting to play a little bit better, and the Spartans are kind of in desperation mode because they've got 3 games left and they've got to win 2 of them to get to a bowl. And they really do not want to go into that last game at Penn State and need to get a win in Happy Valley to make it to a bowl game. They have a straightforward path here: beat Rutgers at home, beat Indiana at home, and they go to the postseason. And considering where this season started for the Spartans, they'll take it.
Yep, for sure. Got to win this one. Got to win this one. All right, let's go to Minnesota. Now, it's an interesting game here, Dan, because Corey took Northwestern as his lock of the week. I
Yeah.
took Minnesota as my lock of the week, and Minnesota here
Mhm.
minus 17.5. The computer likes them by 22 over the Wildcats. That bodes well. Looks good for me. What's your thoughts on this one here?
Yeah. So Minnesota, it's just kind of a weird situation with the Gophers. They have so many head scratchers under PJ Fleck, and then they have some games where they really show up. Northwestern, I think, kind of just shot its wad last week against Ohio State. I think that was as good as they can possibly play. I really don't think it's going to work out for the Wildcats having to travel to Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the Gophers, they're in a decent position because if Illinois implodes down the stretch, which is not out of the realm of possibility, I'm pretty sure there's some tiebreaker in there where Minnesota can find its way to Indianapolis. Like I think there's I think at least everybody except Nebraska and Northwestern is still somehow alive for the Big Ten West title at this point. And I mean, somebody has to win today between Illinois and Purdue, but there's no guarantee that Illinois finishes things all that strong, especially because the Illini just lost to Michigan State and they have to play Michigan next week.
Yep.
So Minnesota's got to come into this thinking that if we take care of our final couple games, this might all work out for us. So let's just take care of business.
Yeah, which would be crazy. Which would be crazy.
Yeah.
That those standings are fun though. That west
Yeah.
side is very interesting. So, all right, Pac-12 here last week, 5-1 straight up. That's awesome. 3-3 against the spread, not terrible either. Washington State -9.5, but the computer likes them by 15 over ASU.
Yeah, I really don't think this is going to work out well for the Sun Devils at all. I mean, this isn't a good team to begin with. I mean, everybody saw that ASU was kind of in trouble when they got beat by Eastern Michigan pretty early in the season, and Eastern Michigan has not exactly made that win stand up. I mean, they've played decent in the MAC, but still not anywhere near a team that should be beating Arizona State. And on top of that, ASU's got to deal with some weather here. And
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be in the 30s in Pullman and could drop to the 20s by the time this game is over. And they don't really see that in the desert. So you take a team with virtually no motivation because unless something strange happens and Arizona State is able to pull 3 wins out of nowhere, they're not going to be going to the postseason. So if ASU gets behind in this game, I think they fold.
Yeah, I like Washington State here too. -9.5. I thought that was a little low too. I thought that was a little low as well.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
I think that and let's see the Big Ten one we just talked about. Michigan State could be a good teaser too if you're scared of big numbers. So, all right, let's go UCLA here -19.5. Computer likes them by 19. Basically on the dot over Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So pressure's on for UCLA. I mean, they've got to keep winning in order to make it to that Pac-12 title game. They've really got to pull this one out and avoid getting caught looking ahead to USC next week, which that spread might be a little bit too high because of that. I think that rivalry game with the Trojans, especially with so much potentially on the line, because if Oregon takes care of business and beats Utah, I'm pretty sure the winner of UCLA USC would be right in line to go to the Pac-12 title game. So UCLA is probably going to be focused more on getting ready for USC than they will about trying to put up a huge number against Arizona. So I think this game could be a little bit closer than people expect. I don't think UCLA is going to have any problems winning the game, but I think they might already have their minds on trying to win the victory bell.
Yep, that makes sense. SEC here last week, 3-4 straight up, Dan. 1-6 against the spread. We got Georgia here, -16.5 as Dan's shaking his head by 16 over Mississippi State.
Yeah, the SEC has been just the computer, just the biggest thorn in the computer's hardware all year. Like, I don't know, these ATS numbers just are not working. And I think this is one where the computer is going to take another ATS loss because I think Georgia routs Mississippi State. I mean, we talked about this on the podcast earlier this week, how Mike Leach never does anything different.
Yep.
Kirby Smart is a damn good defensive coach, and this Georgia defense, even with all that they lost last year, is still proving that they're still a very elite squad. So I think Mississippi State gets completely shut down. It will not shock me at all if the Western Bulldogs get held to single digit.
There we go. Good catch.
Yeah,
Florida.
I had to reach back into my Eastern Idaho days because we had Pocatello and Preston high schools in the same league, and back then Pocatello was still known as the Indians, which Preston is also the Indians. So they played each other in everything. So we had to refer to them as the Southern Indians, the Gate City Indians, just whatever we could do to not have to use the city names over and over again.
Yeah. So in your stories, would you also do that then, or how did
Yeah,
that work?
yeah, and
Okay.
stories like when we got to second reference and
Yep.
the Indians was the only way to refer to them. Like we would just say the Gate City Indians for Pocatello and the Southern Indians for Preston.
Okay.
Like
All right.
now Pocatello has since changed its name to the Thunder, so that problem
Yeah.
no longer exists. But
Yep. Yep.
yeah, that was a royal pain.
Good times, right, Dan? Good times.
Yeah.
All right. Florida -8.5. Computer likes them by just 5 over South Carolina.
Yeah, I think Florida might be a little bit overrated here. I think Florida is getting a little too much credit for beating a Texas A&M team that the numbers just love the Aggies for whatever reason, even though Texas A&M just keeps disappointing every week. And I think Florida is getting a little bit too much of a boost from that. And South Carolina should be able to keep this pretty close. I think that the Gamecocks stay within a touchdown.
All right. Good, good. Let's head over to the non-power fives here. Dan, the start in the American last week. Here we go. 4-1 straight up. That's good. 2-3 against the spread. Notre Dame. Let's do a different one. Let's do Houston minus 19.5 by 21 over Temple.
Yeah, so Temple, I've made my feelings pretty clear on the Owls, how this is just a terrible football team. I mean, they play decently at home, but when they get on the road, shield your children's eyes. And UCF beat them 70-13, Memphis 24-3, Duke 30-0. I mean, this team just isn't good. Their run defense is terrible. Their running offense is also terrible. I don't see Houston having too many problems here. I mean, Houston's defense, of course, is a complete wreck after
Yep.
they just gave up 77 points to Southern Methodist, which I honestly wonder on that subject how many times Houston's basketball team is even going to give up that kind of number because Houston's basketball team is actually really good on defense.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's going to be too many games where the Cougars give up 77 on the hardwood this winter, but they managed to do it during the football season. So wow.
Yeah, right there with you, Dan. I almost want to stay away from Temple. However, 3 straight covers. They're coming off that 54-28 win over UCF. So I don't know, maybe building some steam here. We'll see.
Yeah, but to be fair, two of those games were in Philadelphia,
True,
and
true.
South Florida is just so bad. I
Yep.
mean, it's a very good thing that Amy is not a football fan because her alma mater is just embarrassing on the field right now.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
she's told me several times, be nice to the Bulls. I'm like, darling, I can't. They're 1-8. They haven't beaten an FBS team all year. Their one win is Howard.
Yeah, they're terrible. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there we go. All right. So I don't know if you want to talk about this game, Dan, but Tulane, you said, is an automatic DMB. Central
Yes.
Florida plus 1.5. The computer likes them by 1 over Tulane.
Yeah. So I really don't want to touch Tulane because of that stretch early in the season when they beat Kansas State and then they turn around and get beat themselves by someone they had no business losing to. Oh yeah, it was Southern Mississippi. So it's like, how is that the one loss on your record? It just doesn't make any sense. So I think that Tulane does have a good shot to pull this off here, but this isn't one where I want to spend any of my bankroll on this because I just don't know what's going to happen here.
Yep. Almost a 50-50. Well, it basically is,
Yeah, it
50-50
basically
game.
is a coin flip. So I
Yep.
mean, maybe I'd take one of these teams in a teaser, but I
Yeah.
probably will stay away from it completely.
Yep. Heck, you could get Tulane what to dang near +6. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, almost a stay away game. So, all right, Conference USA here last week, 3-1 straight up, 3-1 against the spread. That's awesome. Middle
Yeah,
Tennessee minus 10.5. Computer likes them by 15 over Charlotte.
yeah. Charlotte, they've had a couple decent moments, but they've had a couple moments where they have just been unbelievably awful.
Yep.
And last week was another one of those, getting walloped 59-7 against Western Kentucky. The pattern this year has mostly been that Charlotte pulls out one decent game and then follows it up with one terrible game. They've alternated between covering and not in each of the past 5 weeks. So I think that this might be one where they have a chance at the cover based on how the pattern has worked out. Middle Tennessee has also been very inconsistent. So with a spread that big and that many points on the table, this probably isn't one that I'm going to feel confident about touching.
We've talked a lot about Western Kentucky here, Dan. This year minus 13.5. They have to win this one. It's over
Yeah.
Rice here. Yep. This Saturday today, but the computer likes them by 25 over Rice.
Yeah, I mean, Western Kentucky is another one that has been all over the map. I mean,
Yep.
when the Hilltoppers want to be at their best, they're probably one of the best teams in Conference USA. When they don't put a good effort on the field, they can get walloped by anyone. I mean, North Texas beat them by 27 2 weeks ago. Then they turn around and beat Charlotte by 52. So this game with Rice is going to be a tough one to predict because Rice is going to be very motivated, but I think that this might be kind of the end of the road for Rice's bull hopes because even though the Owls are 5-4 and they only need one, you look at their schedule down the stretch, at Western Kentucky, UTSA, at North Texas. Those are the three best teams in
Yep.
Conference USA.
Yep.
And I just don't think Rice is up to the challenge. They faced all these teams last year, of course. They were getting more than 2 touchdowns against both Western Kentucky and UTSA, and they didn't cover any of their situation. So I really don't like Rice's chances here. I think this is where we get a good Western Kentucky version and the Hilltoppers cover.
Nice. Like it. Last week, Independence 2-1 straight up, 3-0 against spread. Just one game here, Dan. Liberty minus 13.5. The computer likes them by 14 over UConn. This may be my favorite Dan line of the week. Jim Mora Jr. is building something not horrible in East Hartford. Not horrible. So what do you like here, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, Connecticut used to be a complete dumpster fire. I mean, that's what they've been for the past few years. And this season, Connecticut is actually somewhat decent. And it's a hard job because you're playing in an area where football is not a priority. I mean, football ranks behind both basketball and hockey as a major sport for a lot of these schools. So, and in UConn's case, it even ranks behind women's basketball.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you throw in UConn is not in a conference for football. So there's no guarantee of any bowl tie-ins. So basically, you earn everything you get at Dome UConn. And Jim Mora Jr. has this team playing hard and actually possibly going to be bowl eligible. If they beat either Liberty or Army in their final 2 weeks, UConn's going to make a bowl. And given where they've been, that's just crazy. So I expect UConn to show a lot of fight here. Liberty is a talented team, but I honestly wonder if Liberty is going to have the motivation to pull out a win in this game because Liberty's already locked up bowl eligibility. There's no worries there. The Flames are 8-1, and they're coming off a win over an SEC opponent in Arkansas. I mean, are they going to have their minds ready to play UConn? And on top of that, next week they get to host Virginia Tech. And for Liberty to even be hosting Virginia Tech at all, I mean, those schools are not very far apart. Like they're in the same part of the state, Lynchburg and Blacksburg. And Liberty has just lived in the shadow of all of those D1 schools in the state for so long until they finally got there themselves. To be hosting Virginia Tech and to actually probably be favored in that game is going to be huge for Liberty. And I think they're probably going to be thinking about Arkansas and Virginia Tech and not thinking about UConn on this trip. So I like the Huskies here.
Yeah, I do as well. Huskies 5-2. They've been great all year against the spreads. If you look at Liberty, just 1-4 as a favorite. So keep that in mind there. So, all right, cool. Mountain West here last week, 4-1 straight up, 1-4 against the spread. Let's go to Wyoming here, minus 9.5. The computer likes them by 10 over Colorado State.
Yeah, I think the computer might be underestimating Wyoming a little bit, and Wyoming has really been a surprising team. Craig Bold definitely deserves some Coach of the Year votes in the Mountain West because this team was supposed to be a 4-5 win team, miss a bowl game, and rebuild for next year after they got hit hard by graduation. But they've won 3 in a row, and they're doing it without anything resembling a passing offense. I mean, this team runs the ball very well, but they can't throw it at all. Colorado State doesn't really do much of anything well. So I think this will be interesting because it's a rivalry game, but I think Wyoming just runs the ball as much as they want to, controls the clock, and ends up pulling out a comfortable victory here.
Sounds good. Let's head to Utah State minus 10.5. The computer likes them by just 8 over Hawaii.
Yeah, so Utah State going up against a Hawaii team that has actually been a little bit more impressive than people thought. I mean, Hawaii came in and just got blasted by Vanderbilt in that opening game, and everybody decided, okay, this team's done. But Hawaii has actually been a pretty tough out in Mountain West play. I mean, up until Fresno State routed them last week, Hawaii had 4 straight covers. So this might be one where Utah State has to play a tougher game than it wants to, and I think Hawaii can hang around.
Sounds good. Let's head to the Sun Belt here. Last week, 4-1 straight up, 2-3 against the spread. Coastal Carolina here, Dan, minus 4.5, but the computer likes them by 10 over Southern Miss. Southern Miss is real bad.
I mean, Southern Miss has actually been a tough team to figure out. I mean, they're 5-4 with a win over Tulane, and yet they lost by 28 to Georgia State last week. So
Yeah.
figure them out if you can. I've basically given up on trying to solve the Eagles. But the reason for the disparity in this line is because the computer has no way of knowing that Grayson McCall is injured.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the computer is still operating under the assumption that he's going to be playing. We obviously know that he is not. So yeah, this might be one to either stay away from or take Southern Miss in the points, especially because if the Golden Eagles get a win here, they're bowl eligible.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, word of the wise. If someone's injured, if the star's injured, just stay away, right? Just stay away. Who knows what could happen? So,
Yep.
All right, let's go to Georgia State here. They should be able to just kind of run all over Louisiana Monroe. You would think minus 13.5 by 17. What do you like here?
Yeah, you would think that, given that Louisiana Monroe's defense is not very strong. Georgia State, fifth in the nation running the football. And they've been playing pretty well as of late. They've won 4 of their last 5, and the one was Appalachian State. So Georgia State's done very well for itself this season, and the pressure is on for them as well. I mean, they're sitting at 4-5, so they've got to get some wins on the board to get to bowl eligibility. So yeah, it starts here for them.
Sounds good. All right, there is the main meat and potatoes of the show, Dan. Picks. Let's head to our picks here before we get out of here. I need a winner. I need to start putting some wins together. But we'll start with you, Dan. Who do you have here for today?
All right. So I think I actually am going to go with that independent play and take Connecticut plus 13.5 against Liberty. I mean, I am going against the computer a little bit here, but I mean, it's a half a point, so it's not much of a difference. And I think Connecticut is just going to be by far the more motivated team, and Liberty is not going to be ready to play this game and not going to be ready to win this thing by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. All right. I like it. I have that on my card as well. And like I said, I have Minnesota as my lock over Northwestern, but I'm gonna pick something different here. I'm gonna go Duke, Dan, at home. I think they play very well at home over Virginia Tech. I think they can easily get this done. Like we said earlier, if you want it in a teaser, take it in a teaser, take a money line in a parlay, whatever you want. I think Duke here can cover this one and win by double digits at least.
Yeah, I really like that play, and I mean my lock during the week was Ohio State against Indiana, and I think that was partially just because of how bad Indiana was when I had to watch them last week. But Virginia Tech is not much better than Indiana, and
no.
Duke is going to be very motivated to keep the wins coming and try to get to a nice destination. Yeah, I think Virginia Tech is probably cooked, and yeah, I really like that play.
Yep, Duke at home, love it. All right, there we go. That's Dan Angel 11 on Twitter. I'm Kota Calvert Pace, part of the Kota Sports Gambling and Network here. Dan, of course, the computer show for this week is in the books. Good luck, everyone. Best of luck if you tail. Again, all of the links are below in the description. If this is your first episode watching the computer show, check that out. Dan did a great job of explaining things and all of that jazz as well. So go follow us on Twitter, and we'll see everybody next week. All right, Dan, have a good weekend.
All right, you too. Bye.